Hello and welcome back once again to the single malt review. As I fly solo on this one, we'll just have to buckle in and see if we get away with it. Dave was, alas, busy, but he'll be back next week. And what are we having a look at? It's another rum, which should surprise nobody at this point. It seems we're as much rum fans as we are malt fans, and that might say something about the increasing quality of rum these days. Who knows? But the rum in question is Ron Mocambo. 20 years old, single barrel. In quotation, art edition, in this case, if you're into that sort of thing. I suppose it's quite an interesting bottle, but who cares, really? However, what it is I think, a fairly worthwhile rum with a bit of a difference from a lot of others. One of the big differences being where it comes from. This is a Mexican rum, which is more common than you think. You don't really think of Mexico as much of a rum country. I don't anyway. You think Mexico, well, that's tequila, obviously. But they make quite a lot of rum out there as well, and some of it, as we will find out, is actually pretty worthwhile, if a little bit different. Now, the reason this one caught my eye specifically is I'm developing a slight prejudice against some rums in that they are so often Solera systems, not sort of genuine aging in their own casks for their whole lives like we're all used to with Scotch whisky. They're in the Solera system where they get sort of tapped off from one rack of casks to the next, to the next, to the next, and then they're bottled, and what you end up with is at best, an average age, but they don't really express the same, they don't go on the same linear journey that, I say properly aged things. Aged things that are in the barrel for the entirety of their lives, be it one barrel or another, they are in there, and so they are, all of that spirit is that age. This one being a single barrel rum, unless they're having me on, has been aged in that Scotch whisky-esque way. It has been in whatever barrel it's been in for that full 20 years. And that's something I really look out for in rum these days, because it tends to produce something quite a lot more interesting, I find. So we will just have to see if that bears out. But anyway, Ron Mocambo, 20 years old. As for what's actually in here colour-wise, it's 40%, I should say, so it will be very, very likely chill filtered. And this colour, well, good grief, this colour, if it's not coloured, then it was in one hell of an active cask. I have seen some Scotch whiskies come out like this, but not a great many. So for the whole range to look more or less like this, I think maybe just a little bit of colouring has gone in here. I couldn't find any solid info on that, so you have to correct me if you can, but at any rate, still, we won't hold that too much against it, because that 40% chill filtration and colouring is, for better or worse, still very much the norm for rums rather than Scotch whiskies these days. So, how does it actually express? It's quite different from some of the previous ones we've tried, as I said. It's comparatively a very dry rum, and it may just be the power of suggestion, but all these sort of island rums, they tend to express quite tropical, fruity flavours, as we've discovered. And I'm sure a portion of that is down to the power of suggestion. Well, it comes from Jamaica, it must taste of bananas or whatever. This one, for whatever reason, is far more restrained, and I think more than just because it's older. They're definitely going for a sort of a drier build here with all of their flavours. Most immediate of which is the wood. This is a very, very wood-dominated rum, and that may not be the case for all of them. This review is really only going to be slightly useful for people actually in the market for this particular one, because given that it is single barrel, and it even lists the barrel here, this is number 524, of which they only got 230 bottles out of, so that's probably a hogshead, if not something even smaller, considering that these were bottled at 40% as well. That has lost a great deal over its lifetime. How this one expresses may be quite a bit different from the one the barrel next door, so who knows. You'll just have to take everything I say, as you should always, with a grain of salt. At any rate, wood is what you get, and all the things that come with that wood. You get a huge amount of vanilla, and it's a very, very sweet, almost vanilla essence. The sort of stuff you get in the baking aisle, and you can, if you take the lid off and smell it, especially if you're 7 years old, it smells really delicious right up until you actually put it in your mouth, and then that's the last time you do that ever again. But the smell is quite distinctive, and this one has it in spades. And coming up after that is a significant maple syrup, which is quite interesting. You get this in some bourbons, and less with sherry, but here it is. So, as to what this cask really was, and it doesn't have to be a single one. They might have shunted this cask around. They might have filled it into some other ones over its life. That does happen. It's still more or less single barrel. Doesn't matter that the barrel's changed. And in addition to that, you'll notice me subtly. Can you notice? Subtly glancing at my tasting notes, or trying a new sneaky thing which makes me a bit more on point, especially if I'm here by myself without Dave to give me a pause for thought while I actually tease apart the tasting notes in my brain. So I've got a wee cheat sheet in front of me. You'll forgive me, I'm sure. And just coming in, sneaking through on the back is a quite intriguing smokiness. And it's not like a Scotch smokiness at all. It's very much a wood smokiness, like a char, like a smouldering, embery smokiness. There's no tang to it. It's definitely not peat. It's definitely smoke from the wood. Probably a heavy char on the barrel, I'd say, is where it probably came from. But all up, it's a really pretty good and inviting nose. And it brings to mind a very, very sweet character of whiskey, or rum in this case. Which is not how it expresses on the palate, which makes it, if anything, just a bit more interesting. It's really quite a dry rum on the palate, in defiance of that really quite saucy nose it's got on it. On the palate there is more nuts than anything else. There is hazelnut, there is a significant amount of pecan. If you've ever had pecan pie, that's a distinct note in the palate. And then there is significantly more smoke, or char, if you can make the differentiation. And it's shorter and drier than your taste buds are expecting based on that nose. It's a really quite a juxtaposition between the nose and the palate. It's perfectly pleasant. It sort of surprises you on a biological level, just how dry it is, considering the aroma. So there you go, electric if nothing else. How it stacks up against other ones we've tried, it's definitely in the vein of your Zacapas 21-year-old and your the other very Spanish name that escapes me momentarily. You'll be able to look them up. 20 and 21 seems to be the sort of the bracket for that, but the other ones we've tried have been Solera ones, and I think this one, while I don't think it's as good, not quite as good as the Zacapa, which was really, really quite excellent, it's a little bit more interesting. It's a bit more cerebral, both from the fact that it's been aged properly and that it is a single barrel. That, of course, makes the review not meaningless, but it makes it a bit more scattershot for people actually in the market for this, as I said. But it'll give you a hint, at any rate, because they'll try to maintain some consistency, of course. And if nothing else, you get this weird, hairy bottle, which the bottle has apparently won awards. The World Star Award for Packaging. Good grief. Oh well, I suppose if it's an award you might as well slap it on there. Makes it look good on the shelf. However, scores. This one, as far as I'm concerned, is an Initially I thought this was going to be an 89, but that dryness is just slightly against my personal preference for a rum. Initially I thought, well, that's good, it makes it a bit more of a thinker's rum, but it makes it a little harder to drink. So as the bottle's gone down, I've modified my thoughts on this slightly. It's probably why we review all those bottles so late in their life, but it's gone down to a 5 for me, and I think that's a good place for it to sit. It's rum that I think it won't be for everybody, but the people that do enjoy it may enjoy it really quite a lot, so maybe it balances out between its enthusiasts there. So anyway, 85 from me, and certainly worth a look. I should also mention it's really pretty well priced. Compared to a lot of the properly aged, non-Solera 20-year-old rums, this one is probably, if not the cheapest, it's one of the cheapest, especially compared to something like Appleton Estate. It's not as good as Appleton Estate 20-year-old, or 21, I forget. Don't confuse me there, but it is significantly cheaper, so quite a good entry level into aged rums, at any rate. So yes, Ron Mocambo, and another rum from the Single Malt Review. How embarrassing. I will have another wee rummage in the cupboard and see if I can find something a bit more Scotch appropriate for the next one. Whether it will be internet appropriate, we will find out, but stick with us. Slide